New forecasts show that Britain's living standards will fall behind Lithuania's in less than 5 years and Turkey's in less than 20. The research carried out by the Centre for Economics and Business Research also predicts the UK will fall from the 30th richest country to the 46th by 2050, behind Latvia, Serbia and Panama. Let's speak to Douglas Mcwilliams, who's the founder of the Centre for Economics and Business Research. Morning, Douglas.
Good morning.
So this suggests that Britain is on track for lower living standards than some former communist states within a decade. What's driving the projection?
We're not growing very fast. Our productivity is very weak. And there are a whole host of reasons that are causing that. And because we're not growing very fast, what that means is other countries are catching up with us and overtaking us. I mean, by 2050, we're forecasting that Malaysia will have caught up with the UK. I was brought up in Malaysia, and it was a poor country then. And although I'm delighted to see my former friends get rich, we really ought to be doing better than that, given that we've had a flying start.
What do we measure living standards based on?
It's a measure called GDP per capita. It's not by any means perfect, and it's adjusted for the cost of living. So it's a composite measure, but it's a pretty good indication. I mean, it may not be perfect, but it will be between 10 and 15% right.
OK. And when we talk about countries like Lithuania, Poland, etc., overtaking the UK on living standards, are they genuinely becoming more productive, or are they catching up from a kind of lower base, as it were?
Well, both, really. They are becoming more productive than they were before. They're catching up from a lower base. And one thing it's worth just noting, they've got a much lower cost of living than we have. And because they've got a lower cost of living, they can get as rich as us without actually having so many pounds in their pockets, because the pounds go further.
That, though, is often blamed by the government on kind of global factors, energy shocks, inflation, also interest rates and things like that. Is it policy failure that we should draw a line to here, or are global factors significant?
Global factors account for a bit, but the global factors are much the same wherever you are. So policy failures are much more important in the cause of our sort of slipping down the league table. And by the way, I mean, these are rough and ready projections. I don't want to pretend that they're cast in tablets of stone. You get a sort of tendency, once you start doing badly, the sort of best players leave, as it were. And often a slide can turn into something a lot more precipitate.
When we consider other countries that we often compare ourselves to, what about like France and Canada, for example, we are not in this alone, are we? These kind of declining growth, genteel decline, I think is what David Cameron once warned of, isn't it? I just wonder if other countries are experiencing things in a similar way to us.
France and Canada are two that are doing particularly badly. But, France doesn't have a government, and Canada's got its problems with its arguments with Donald Trump. I think that we should blame ourselves for doing as badly as we appear to be doing.
What should we learn from those who are doing well?
What they tend to do is be very careful about taxing. Be very careful about taxing wealth in particular, because the moment you try and tax wealth, the money disappears. We should be careful about trying to keep entrepreneurial people, talented people who create growth for everyone else. And we should not just impose regulations willy-nilly. Any regulation we impose needs to be cost justified. And in recent years, too many times we've put in regulations that cost a lot more than the problems that they solve.
In terms of enacting what you've just spoken of there, is any of that a quick fix?
It could be a fairly quick fix. We interviewed 35 leaders, people like Tony Blair, David Cameron, Boris Johnson. They all reckoned that you could fix the problem with enough leadership. They said it's not easy, but if you're determined to do it, they reckon that you could carry the electorate along with you. So, I mean, I bow to them in political experience. They know a lot more about politics than I do. And they reckon that it could be done. I don't pretend it's easy.
Yeah.
I just think that this is what you have to do. I mean, the situation is so bad that we could be a third world country, relatively speaking, in 30 years.
Gosh, I mean, that is a stark warning. A third world country. What do you mean by that? Because that will invoke and provoke images of poverty and hunger and starvation and roads that don't work and, all these sorts of things. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it won't be probably poverty and starvation. I think we'd have to slide a lot more to get that. But I mean, roads that don't work, we've already got that. Trains that don't work, we've already got that. We're quite likely to have power cuts in the near future. So there'll be things that used to work and no longer work. And that, I think, is one of the consequences of the economic failure.
That's really Is this cyclical or structural?
It's structural, but the structure can be reformed.
Okay. Well, that's a reason for optimism. And to revert back to what the leaders you interviewed said about the need for more leadership, were they specific on what that means? Is it by way of structural reform, for example?
It's by way of structural reform, it's by way of tax reform, it's by way of limiting government spending, which is a big part of the problems that have emerged. Our productivity in government has declined, our welfare rolls have suddenly shot up. It's a matter of dealing with all these things.
Gosh, it's a big job, Douglas, I think is the bottom line.
That's why we wrote a book about it.
Yes, you are quite right. Thank you very much. It's good to speak to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
That is Douglas Mcwilliams, who's the founder of the Centre for Economics and Business Research, setting out really quite starkly why quite a lot of action is needed as soon as humanly possible, frankly.
Yeah. A third world country relatively in 30 years is what Britain could become. It is quite a stark warning.